we will kind of go ahead and get started if everybody's good with that. So we'll go through and I'll just kind of do a quick roll call down the line of the council members just to make sure everybody's here and kind of doing their thing. So I'm Alfredo Herrera and I'm here. Scott, are you here?
I am indeed.
All right. Stuart?
Here.
All right, cool. Greg, I don't think he's here. Oh,
I'm here.
There you are. Aha.
I'm here.
Dan?
Here.
All right. Gary?
Here.
All right. Eric Snowden indicated he would be late. Mark Hoover?
I'm here.
Thad?
Here.
I don't see John Guskowski. I don't think he's going to be here. Emily
He's
Wilson.
counting his Jeopardy winnings.
Yeah, right. Emily's in transit, so I don't think she was going to be here. She might be here later, but not here now. Peter?
Here.
All right. And then Meg said that she was unable to attend. And then I just want to acknowledge Bill Toussaint. I think he's filling in for IT on this one. So we seem to have enough people to get started. So with that, I just kind of want to thank everybody for putting up with a couple of reschedulings on this meeting. We just had a lot going on in January. But we're trying to get started and on a good foot on the with the start of the year. So we are looking to kind of kick off again and do some more good work in the second year of this GIS Advisory Council meeting. With that, the first thing I kind of want to talk about, as some of you have already noticed, we have hired a GIS coordinator in Carl Zimmerman. So he has been on board for almost 2 weeks now, and he's been very, very instrumental and helpful already in kind of making sure that we can kind of keep up with all of the demands and tasks that we have here at the GIS office. So you can reach out to Carl and say hi, and I'm sure you will be hearing more from him in the future. So with that, I think those are really the only introductory comments I have for today. So we'll move on to any public comments. Give it a few minutes for anyone that is not a advisory council member to kind of say anything that they wish to say. All right, I will take that as a no. So with that, we can move into the meeting administration. I think with this one, there's only one item that I have in mind, unless someone else wants to kind of propose something else. And that is, I would like to create a working group around the strategic plan or the drafting of the strategic plan. Just so that, that's something that we can start work on, whether we have time to discuss it today because we only have an hour instead of an hour and a half. Maybe we can do a roll call again to kind of vote on whether we would like to create that particular working group. So I'll start. I say yay. Scott?
Yay.
All right. Stuart?
Yep.
Greg?
Yay.
Dan?
Yay.
Gary?
Yay.
I don't think Eric is here yet, so looks like next is Mark Hoover.
Yay.
Thad?
Yay.
All right. Peter?
Aye.
All right. I think that is everyone that is here.
John Guskowski has joined.
Oh, he has. John, go ahead.
He might have joined during the explain if you want to
Oh,
get a
right.
sense of what he's voting on.
Yeah, sure. Hi, John. Thanks for joining. We are currently voting on whether on the creation of a working group for the strategic creation and drafting of the strategic plan.
Oh, yeah, hell yes, let's do that.
All right, I'll take that as a yay. So I guess motion carries. We'll start that. I would like to have Carl be kind of heading that up. If anybody would like to kind of participate with him and either be a co-chair or just a member of that working group, please reach out to him and just let me know. Is there any other business from any of the other council members, kind of administrative, that they would like to discuss? All right, moving on. Then I will go through. I'll start going through the priority topics for the council and the GIS office. And so basically I'll just go through each topic. You guys can ask questions as they come up at the end of each update, and then we will kind of go through that. I'll start off with the aerial imagery acquisition. So the update there is we have selected a vendor. We are currently nearing the end of the contracting process, which has been beastly. But we are pretty much there. It's looking pretty good. The vendor is already getting ready to kind of fly. So as soon as the contract is executed, they can kind of go ahead and do their thing. A word on some of the optionals that we did go ahead and purchase are, we did purchase additional LiDAR classifications for the vegetation, low, medium, and high, just so that we can then have that classified and produce better products on the back end. We did also opt in for true ortho imageries over all the populated areas, as well as tall bridges and overpasses, and a few other areas as identified by the vendor. And then the other kind of big additional product that we are purchasing along with the flight for statewide is a 3D terrain model with 3D buildings at level of detail 2. I am going to go through and talk about some of the things that we did kind of put on hold for various reasons. If you want to discuss, the whys and the hows as to why we opted to kind of hold back on those, we can discuss those privately. Can't discuss them openly because negotiations are still ongoing on those. The first one is impervious surface analysis. We did hold on that for the moment because primarily due to cost, but we also have some questions about that. So we decided to kind of put a pause on that so that we can make sure that planes can get in the air sooner rather than later, rather than hold up the contract. The similar reasons was also for the inland bathymetry of lakes, rivers, and ponds and lakes as identified by DEEP. Once again, we just put a pin in that. We're going to revisit that later. We are kind of planning to do a kind of a revisit in 24 and then do an amendment to the contract then to kind of purchase anything else that was kind of left on the table. The other thing that the other two items that we kind of put on hold for similar reasons, just to not hold things up, is the updated hydrography, whether it is, to kind of determine whether we do an elevation-derived hydrography model or if we just do simple hydrography model. We are still getting a updated hydrography layer. It's just not going to be a full, flow analysis capable EDH. And then the last thing is just the change of detection. We also skipped that on that, but that one is because the change of detection is dependent on the impervious surface analysis, so we can't do one without the other. So that, in a nutshell, is the update on the aerial imagery. Does anyone have any questions? Thad, go ahead.
Yes, Alfredo. I had a meeting a few weeks ago with my town here, and I announced that I announced that a vendor had been selected,
Yeah.
and they were all very excited. And they're all very
Sure.
excited to have it go forward. The question that was raised was, will the vendor or will the project ask towns for ground control support data?
We had identified ground control support data from the last flight, and they are currently in the plan. They are going to reevaluate all of those and then add ones that make sense. If you have any additional, please get with me and I'll see if we can get that over to the vendor.
Okay, yeah. No, like I said, my town was willing to go ahead and provide that if it was necessary. That would help increase the accuracy value of the product.
Of course, if you have that available, I'm sure we can kind of make that work and add it to the project. In terms of the ground control, too much is not enough. Yeah, Mark.
Do you have any info on like what kind of buy-up options there could be for towns, or is that still in negotiations?
So that aspect of it is still pretty open. So that is basically the options are, like if you're kind of buying up a deliverable that is based off of something that is being acquired that doesn't necessarily impact the flight plan, like you can do that at any time. That's not a big deal. If you are planning to do something that might affect the flight plans, we can talk ahead of time, and you can and I can help you kind of communicate with the vendor as soon as the contract is executed. If it doesn't work out for, say, the 23 flight because of the time crunch, we do have an opportunity in 26 to do something slightly different with the flight. So like, like for example, if, you as a region want to do like obliques, that is something that, like we may have missed the window to do that with the 23 flight, but it's still obviously very within the window for the 26 flight.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Anything else from anyone? All right. Then I guess I will move on to the GIS clearinghouse update. So Emily's not here, but I will give an update. So last GIS day, we launched the geodata portal to much fanfare, I suppose. Most of the feedback that I've gotten is that everybody seems to be liking it and finding it useful. We just need to be, or I need to be a little bit more proactive about kind of getting the word out that it's there. A lot of people seem to not immediately realize that it is up and available and has a lot of data in it. So any help on that front is very welcome, just to make sure that people are using it. People are using it, but like the more that we share this, the better. Generally, it's a really useful and powerful tool, and I think it'll only continue to be more useful and powerful as time goes on. As far as the work group is concerned, they are still meeting. We're going to kind of reconvene here in the next few weeks to kind of reset and really start on the process of kind of writing the recommendations document of what we ultimately want the geodata portal to be. Now that we've kind of gotten over that initial hurdle of like, now we have a launch version of the geodata portal, like what do we want this to ultimately look like, thinking about things that we want in it that may not be easy to achieve, that will take some time, and things that we know that like we have to work on, things like that. So that group is going to be meeting soon to kind of continue that work. Let's see if, yeah, so that's pretty much it on the geodata portal.
Just real quick, Carl, that's
Yep.
your phone number in the chat, or that's in. Okay, just for attendance purposes.
Oh, I'm finally back on. Sorry, my team's bombed out on me.
One
Yeah,
quick question
I don't have a phone. I don't have a phone number yet, just so you know.
Oh no, the person who's called in, is that you, Carl? Though, 'cause there's a phone number. For...
Yeah, that's me.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you.
All right. Next up is parcel drafting standards. I will pass
Oh,
that off to Thad. Oh,
Can I
did
have
you
one quick
another
question? Sorry, Alfredo.
Yeah,
For the
please.
for the portal, is that where the OPM parcels are gonna like be distributed now? I know Carl reached out for a data set for my region, but like the
That is the plan.
2022 data, I know
Yeah.
it's not up on the OPM site. Is that gonna be
Yeah.
the landing spot? Okay.
Yeah, we are aiming to put it on the geodata portal. In a pinch, we may put it on the open data portal. It depends on, what difficulties we have in publishing it in a way that AGOL and Hub are happy with. Because if it's still kind of too messy to be able to kind of put it into a service, then we may still put it on the open data site for now to kind of so that it is available, and then give us time to kind of work in the background to actually get it up as a service. But I will say that the and I'll talk about this later when we after the CAMA update, but we are planning to kind of do a lot more work on the parcels. We've just been behind, but that's just because it's been me and David. We just been get pulled in too many directions so far. So yes.
All right, thanks.
Yep. So next up is parcel drafting standards. Thad, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alfredo. So the Parcel Data Creation Standards Committee has continued to kind of work on the final document. Folks are finalizing their contributions, and we're at the point now where the document is essentially in rough draft form. So now we are polishing the data that's been put in there for final, and we expect to have something to review probably, I'd say, April, May timeframe. And then we'll be submitting it to the advisory board at that time for approval and comments. Yeah, this is going to be seen kind of as a somewhat living, breathing document in the sense that, yes, we will have a final draft, but as things develop, as people run into things that are pertinent to parcel data creation, as we get to the point where we start tying into, let's say, the CAMA standard and those kinds of things. There's going to kind of be continued growth and crossover amongst those groups. So yeah, we're really in good shape. I'm really, really happy. I actually have the document up here on my other screen, and it looks good for a rough draft. There is some polishing and there is some additional things that need to be done to it, but it is in good shape right now.
All right, thank you. That sounds great. Any questions for Thad or me on this topic? All right, cool. Moving on. Thanks, Thad. So next topic is addressing. So this one has been, still kind of on hold. We've been, David and I have been working kind of in the background to improve the address layer, also in conjunction with Dan, to make sure that we find as many addresses as we can. We have a pretty good set of missing things that were kind of missing from the E911, in collaboration with some of the data sets that we got from Peter and some of the data sets that we got from Eversource, as I said before. The point where we are right now is we do have kind of some assistance in terms of an intern who is looking at kind of the draft schema that we had for what we're calling a master address layer, and kind of looking at what are the core kind of fields that we're going to need to include in there so that we can create the derivative products for, say, public safety, for economic development, and the various other uses of the address data set, and looking towards being able to publish this data set as a complete data set and then later as a geocoder, hopefully with DOT's assistance there, at least in the short term. So, we're kind of working to kind of come up with what that schema looks like, and then how we're going to get what we have now into that schema. Once we do that, then we're kind of open it up a little bit more for discussion to kind of say, okay, for kind of review by this council and other groups, to make sure that it is like we're not missing anything, so that we can kind of discuss what all these things are. I know we've been kind of playing this one a little bit close to the vest, but it's just we've been trying to wrap our heads around the problem and some of the complexities around it before we kind of really opened it up for discussion more so, which is why we've been kind of like working away at it in the back end, so to speak. Thad, go ahead.
So, Alfredo, and I'm sure I know the answer to this, but I just want to double check. So, with that process going on, have you guys been consulting and looking at the document and the workings by the NINA group, as well as those discussions that have been coming out of NISJIC? I've kind of been watching with a left eye, and they've really been working hard on the idea of this national address database.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we've been in communication with that group. We've presented to that group actually, mostly on the some of the challenges in finding the addresses and dealing with the issues surrounding the FCC challenge process for the broadband availability. In particular, that's been quite the challenge, and David has done an amazing job on that front. But like, we've been kind of pulling as many resources as we can to kind of look at, like what all we need to kind of, how we need to navigate. We're just, like I said, we've been trying to understand the problem as fully as we can before we really kind of start driving down a particular road. Any other questions? Right. Next up is broadband. David was unable to join, but he sent along some notes for me to kind of review. So with the broadband, he's continuing the validation and analysis process of unserved and underserved addresses in the state. Just a lot of checking points on maps to make sure they're in the right spot, or that it agrees with the cost quest stuff from the FCC, and it agrees with the data from the ISPs. We are going to be issuing a new data request to the ISPs around the end of February, asking for additional information, in particular, non-standard installations and areas that are already in progress. We want them to tell us so that we don't kind of duplicate efforts on funding a project that is already being built out by an existing ISP. So the non-standard installations is essentially looking for areas where there's like a lot of long driveways and things like that, so that we know where those are, because those are considered unserved, and because of the way the funding is allocated, we have to remedy those first before we can move to the underserved and then the adoption community anchor institutions to kind of help the adoption problem. Which is kind of where most of the challenges in Connecticut are as far as broadband access and availability. We have a really strong emphasis on state and local cooperation. We have a non-traditional CAI survey. Community anchor. So basically, we're looking for non-standard community anchor institutions, like that anyone that basically has like digital literacy programs that's not like a traditional library or school or something like that, like, might be a senior center or a community organization. Like an Elks Lodge has like a random class on like how to use the internet, like we're looking for those kinds of things, because they may not be listed in our list of the usual suspects of community anchor institutions. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to create as a survey. I have a link that I can provide. I'll drop it into the chat for that survey. So, if you can please share it with anyone and everyone that you can, that would be also very helpful. So we're basically trying to kind of match the definition of community anchor institutions for the FCC, so that we can basically better allocate funds. David has been doing a lot of work visiting all the various COGs. I'm sure you've seen, most of you have seen him talk at those to talk about the FCC challenge processes and requesting support on the community anchor institution survey, as well as other things. He's also working with CCM to kind of further develop their survey. they also have a, hang on, I'm gonna paste another URL here. He has a dashboard for the results of that CCM survey. So once again, any help in kind of distributing the survey or distributing the results, also helpful. And as always, a lot of this stuff is available on the broadbandmaps.ct.gov portal that we have set up. Any questions regarding broadband from anybody? I will do my best to answer them, even though I am not David. John, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry if I'm not coming through very clearly. I just wanted to know if you have any sense of how the CCM survey is going, and like at what level of participation we would consider that, sort of successful enough to get a good sense of actual broadband coverage.
Yeah.
Do we have any? Because
yeah. I don't know that I have a really good answer for you, but like I know we did get more than 2,000 responses. It was pretty widespread. I think it was just enough to start drawing some conclusions from, but that's not to say that we couldn't try and get more. But I know David is doing his best to kind of interpret the data and still trying to wrangle for more responses.
Yeah, I guess from a beating the bushes standpoint, if we should be, still being as aggressive as we can about saying, like this is our opportunity, or if there's a deadline to, nothing like a deadline to get someone to participate in a survey.
Yeah, I don't think we have any deadlines. I think the initial push to get responses has passed, but I will check in with David and see if there is anything that he would like you all to do, and I will kind of communicate that back to you.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Mike, go ahead.
Okay, so a follow-up to that survey acquisition, getting people to fill out the survey. If you do go take the route of doing another survey, or I would push to go through the COGs to have them push through their towns, because if the town posts on the social media, that is the only example of successful outreach I've seen, even at the COG level. So Ridgefield, for example, pushed it through their channels, and they had 1,000 responses. We had a survey for our own study. 1,000 responses, one town. So these channels really work. So that would be my recommendation for any future surveys.
All right.
People love their local Facebook pages for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll be sure to communicate that to David. Go ahead, John.
So actually, to that end, that would be awesome. If there was a very simple sort of prepackaged blast or push or ad or whatever, just so it could be, so towns don't have to rethink it. Just, here's the link, here's the pitch, put it up there.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, I'll communicate that to David and see what he wants to do. I know when they developed the initial survey, like it was a third-party survey company working with CCM in particular, and David was advising them. So there were some limitations as to how and what he could do with that. I think now that we've gotten that initial response and kind of things, I think we have now a bit more flexibility with that, and we may be able to kind of do that and kind of reach a possibly wider audience with this. So I will be sure to follow up with David and then kind of talk about how we want to approach that. One of the other updates I did want to give that he didn't include in his notes, but we did fill out, we did help to contribute to the state broadband report that was published at the end of last year. And then we had a presentation to the governor on that report, along with the other stakeholders that were contributed to the report, like CEN, DEEP, and DAS. And that was very well received. There were lots of questions, lots of engagement from the governor. So, like we're definitely heading in the right direction. And then kind of anecdotally, we've from what we've seen, we're very much in the vanguard of our peers, other states, in analyzing, looking at this, and thinking about this kind of the broadband problem as a whole, and how we think about it geospatially. So, kind of to toot my own horn a little bit, we have been knocking it out of the park on this particular topic, and all credit goes to David because he has been doing amazing work. Next topic is the CAMA and parcel stuff. Mike, do you mind giving at least an update on the CAMA side?
Yeah, happy to. So the CAMA Standard Working Group last year created Schema version 5, and that's what we used and got all our CAMA vendors to set up. And so those reports are all based on Schema version 5. With setup, we then said, how can we refine this one last time, take care of all the bells and whistles and make it really exactly everything we want. So we have version 6 that we have now produced. When we updated version 6, we also looked at what the CAMA providers made for us, because even though we gave them a schema, they didn't create an exact copy of that schema. They got close to it. So I point out errors in their formats that we'd like to see them correct for. So that schema is now complete, and it's been handed off to OPM to be the ones who carry it, to be the messengers and pass it on to the CAMA vendors to request that they make those changes so we can have as streamlined of reports as possible that our assessors will produce for us. And so that's where that leaves off. I also have the schedule available. I'll just share that real quickly, just so it's in the back of your minds. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so the CAMA data should be reflecting the CAMA as collected on October 1st. That's the typical collection that's shared with OPM, or I think it's shared with OPM for review, but shared to the state for review. Then April 1st, that's when the COGs start requesting parcel data. Then May 1st, the data has to be submitted to OPM. And then July 1st, the COGs give a report to OPM. So October, April, May, and July are our target dates. So that's my latest update on CAMA.
All right. Thanks for that, Mike. Appreciate that. Yeah, so to kind of go along with that, like the parcel data, so kind of like some of the things that we are looking to do. Obviously, like I mentioned before, we are looking to publish the 22 data. Carl is hard at work at getting that ready and prepped. We are still exploring whether it's going to go on the GeoData portal or if it's going to go on the Open Data portal in a similar fashion to the way it was last year. We are just trying to make sure that we have as much of it as complete as possible. So there may be a little bit of kind of like 22.5 data mixed in there from some of the municipalities, just because we've been kind of asking for some kind of to fill in some of the gaps, and we just, that's when we're getting it. So that is coming soon. And then kind of the plan going forward for the 23 is to make sure, so like my ultimate goal especially for the 23 parcels is I want to be able to publish these as a service with a related table of the CAMA per town, so that like you can just pull up that data set, filter for what you want, and then pull it. Whether that filter is cross regions, cross municipalities, whatever, or just specific to a single town, it's all there. You can use it, download it, and it try and kind of synthesize the parsec fabric, if you will. We know that is a daunting task. We do anticipate that we should be able to have something before the end of the year. We're hoping to have, in the fall, have a much better version of the parcels, now that we have staff that can actually crunch through this, that aren't, we're not getting pulled off into a whole bunch of other directions. You know, our hope is that we should be able to produce this in the fall and have it up for everyone, so that everybody's like knocking down our door to asking for the 22 parcels, or the 23 parcels next year. So yeah, we're just looking to post it in a more polished manner. And like I said, the data, importantly, the data for 22 will be up very, very soon. With that said, does anybody have any questions on this topic? All right. So with that, I'm going to interject a piece into the agenda from Scott, where I would invite him to talk a little bit about the state data plan, which I think will be a good segue to kind of talk about some of the strategic plan stuff that this council needs to tackle.
Sure. Thanks, Alfredo. And let me thank a couple people in this. So we have a state data plan that covers some GIS topics, but is on a slightly different calendar than the GIS plan that Alfredo talked about at the beginning to form the committee to start doing that. But at least in my opinion, I hopefully this is shared with the members of this group, these are things that should be consistent with one another, speak to one another, and so I'm grateful. Thad particularly is our swing person on both the GIS Advisory Council and the data board that advises on the construction of the state data plan. Mike Tal and the GIS network did like a wonderful job circulating the draft of the state data plan with the network, getting fairly detailed comments on it, because again, for just sort of the policy basis behind it, we have a different calendar for planning for data in general and then GIS specifically, but they should be, you know, planning efforts that are linked with one another and consistent with one another and sort of, you know, speaking the same language. So we have a state data plan, which is due every 2 years at the end of the calendar year. So it just got finalized at the end of December, and is posted on the OPM site, and I'll put the link in the chat in a second. It covers use management, sharing of data by executive branch agencies, so it is not explicitly covering GIS, but GIS data are data, and so I think it fits within that. It doesn't cover some of the work done by municipalities and regional government, and that's where, again, I think the GIS plan is going to go into more detail on the GIS specific content. It'll go more into the intergovernmental nature of things that are for GIS, and it's just on a longer time frame. State data plans on a 2-year cycle. The GIS plan is a 5-year plan, but we are fortunate. Hopefully, we've got the state data plan pulled together, and we had a lot of wonderful advice and guidance from GIS community and Alfredo in the development of that plan. So again, hopefully it has cleared some of the topics that we want to incorporate in the 5-year GIS plan, and again, we'll have kind of a consistent, unsiloed approach to this. I'll just flag a couple of things that are in the state data plan. I'll put the link in the chat maybe while we're talking. You all can read the same thing. There's a couple of things we're doing. Oh, I just raised my hand, sorry. Where's the chat? There. So the state data plan has 3 priorities, and again, hopefully these are sort of shared priorities with GIS community, maybe slightly different emphasis. One is improving access to data. I know that's something we've heard a lot of feedback about from GIS community, that they want access to different kinds of data the state collects, and parcel data came up in this meeting. So first thing, improving access to data. Second one, maybe slightly different because of the focus of the state data plan, is improving agency capacity, so that we have staff who, you know, are trained, have skills to kind of work with and analyze data, that we're building a pipeline of folks out in the future. So we've put a lot of emphasis on training, capacity building activities for the next couple of years to try and make sure that we've got the talent that we need to do the things that people expect of us at the state level. And the third one is the ability of to use data in decision making, and the work that Alfredo talked about on broadband mapping is, to me, like a really great example of that. We're collecting data that's really at the frontier of what other states are doing on the broadband front, and it's going directly into the decision making process to inform how resources are allocated to provide universal access to broadband. So like that's a perfect example of where I think these things are in harmony, and hopefully in this case, we're doing a good job of it. So those 3 priorities are improving access to data, building agency capacity, and being able to find places to use the data to make decisions so it doesn't sit on a shelf. in that, and there's a little more detail in the plan, but we are going to work, I think, in the next year to make, now that the GIS portal is launched and we've had the open data portal up for a few years, to make sure that first off, those two things are interoperable with one another, that as much as possible that we have sort of seamless navigation federation between the two different resources, that we're going through, making sure as much as possible the information is consistent. We're not duplicating information across the different platforms. I think Alfredo mentioned this earlier, but if not, we have someone going through and auditing the metadata we'll go through and I think audit metadata on both of the portals. So we're just going through and making sure we've kind of got our house in order on the access to data front, and then both of those are working in concert with each other as seamlessly as possible, and that we're working to expand what's covered in them as well, and trying to figure out if there's spatial data that we're posting through spatial data portal, if there's non-spatial information that we're covering it there. But whatever door you enter, you can get to it either way. So there's a lot of focus on making those two tools work well with one another. We've got some focus in there on some of the topics that folks have raised here to take a closer look at the production of sort of the parcel data sets and some of the foundational GIS data sets. I think that's where we want to make sure we understand the context and kind of what happens at a municipal level to collect that data, pull it together, get it to the councils of government, get it to the state, so that we've got a pipeline where we can continue to see improvements in that data. I think we've already seen improvements over the past few years, but that's one thing that has come up sort of repeatedly, to be able to get that information more quickly, consistently. And so that's something we pulled out in the state data plan, because again, as everyone in this audience knows, all the GIS information underlies so many different things that people do. We want to make sure that we're thinking of that holistically. I think the other thing where there's going to be some relevance for the GIS community is as we expand the types of data, hopefully increase access to it, and start to work with agencies on building capacity, we're going to see increased need for standardization of different types of things across agencies. And so again, we're having someone audit the metadata now on both of the portals to make sure that's the case. I assume something we'll see come out of the 5-year planning effort for GIS will be a look at where there's standards from the GIS community that are specific to geospatial data standards. We'll have a push for some of those things as well from, I think, outside the GIS community, where we're looking at standards, either reference data sets where we're getting sort of lists of the towns in the state of Connecticut, the names of the state agencies, where we're getting demographic information reported in a consistent fashion. So I think that will naturally happen for the GIS community. And we see the same thing in other states, but we'll see a little bit more focus on standards, I think, from state data plan as well over the next couple of years. And again, I think that's where just making sure that the two worlds, they're not two worlds, because all of you are in a lot of them. I look at, like, Greg is on my screen. Greg is our point person for data GIS, both at DOT. That's really good structure for agencies to have, where we've got that. So I think hopefully these planning efforts will kind of line up with one another, and these examples of having the portals, having standards, having tools that are available, as much as we can increase the consistency of it, it will make it so that there's more bang for the buck, and we're getting more people using this information. So the plan itself is a little more detailed. I'm very happy to go through any of it in painful detail if folks wish. But again, it's a 2-year plan, and it covers a lot of ground, but everything in there we hope is feasible and things we can actually implement. And again, I'll just thank Thad for volunteering his time to the data board, and Mike Towell and the GIS network also for volunteering their time to this. Some of us get paid to do this, but some of us do not, and I appreciate the contribution of time and expertise from those of you who are volunteering it. So, that's it. Alfredo, anything I miss?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
That was a very good summary, and kind of it provides a good segue to kind of what I would like to be kind of like my kind of parting thought for this meeting, and we can discuss before we part. But I want the council members and anyone from the community at large that's on this meeting as well to kind of really start thinking about some of these kind of long-term things that we as a geospatial community want to make sure that we kind of articulate and memorialize in the 5-year plan. Whether you are decide to participate in the work group or not, I think it's still important to hear from all of you. Obviously, we don't have a lot to go on right now in this moment. There's a lot of homework to do kind of before we can really have what I would call a productive discussion on that, because, like if we were to try and talk about it right now, we're just be throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, so to speak. So I think as we start this process of kind of doing our homework, seeing what others' plans look like, making sure that we align with the state data plan and things like that, and then once vice versa, because of the differing timescales of the plans, there could be a good feedback loop as the data plan, state data plan evolves. We can make sure that we incorporate the elements from that into the GIS strategic plan, and then vice versa. So I do see these being as kind of companion strategic plans. But I encourage you all to kind of really think about what some of these long-term things, things that we know because we've been in the profession for a while, like these are pain points. These are things that we would love to see, things like that, just communicate it to myself, Carl, anyone else that's on that work group, and make sure that we can kind of have a productive conversation the next time we meet on this topic. So with that, does anybody have any questions or comments or any, yeah, go ahead.
Alfredo, Eric put it, I think Eric put a link to legislation in the chat, and I think asked if it had been discussed, which has not been discussed in the meeting. I'll just say from like the OPM side, this is under review, as any legislation that pertains to the Office of Policy Manager will review this. However, a good role for the advisory council, if there are things you would advise us as to the content of this, and anybody that wants to speak to it in a little more detail would be welcome to. But it's a good role for the advisory group to say, like, here's things that we, as an advisory council would advise you, the Office of Policy and Management, on this. In this case, this is legislation that creates obligations for OPM to create something, but and I don't want to put people on the spot to think about it, but I think in general, like, this is a good function for the advisory council to say, this is a great idea, needs tweaking, challenges with this, and you're sort of free to state your opinion on it. Most of you, not all of you. So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that catch. I missed that in the chat. Yeah. Does anybody have any input on this, or do you want to kind of discuss this at a later date? Anything? All right. Quiet bunch today.
I didn't have any further comment. I just, it's the first I had heard of it. Someone emailed it to me earlier today, and it said OPM, so, and maps.
Yep. Fair enough. Thank you. Always appreciate if you run across those things, because we don't always see them immediately either. So yeah, as those come up, if you see
Carl,
it,
I just want,
let us know.
you might I just say one thing, Alfredo? I just think the work of the CAMA and the parcel groups is going to be very helpful if that kind of big statewide land record plan comes to fruition. That's going to do a lot of the early organizational work required to do a project like that.
Sure. Yep, that's good. Thad?
Yeah, I guess just a question with regards to legislation, and Scott, maybe you can to respond to this. Is there a discussion right now of a hearing on this, or what's the status of this bill? Because just as Eric said, this is news to me.
It would go to the committee. Someone may be better versed in this than I am, but it would go to planning and development. It would go to the committee whenever the hearing is up on the calendar. I don't know the dates off the top of my head. But that's the committee. They will have regular hearings, and they announce the legislation that will go. There's many bills that don't get a hearing. I don't know whether this one will, but it's that's the committee I would track.
Yep. All right. I think that is everything that I had on my agenda, unless anybody has anything else that they would like to talk about. All right. Then I guess we move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Thank you all for your time, and I appreciate all of your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take
Thanks.
care. Have a nice day.
Andre, can you stop the recording, please?